and welcome to this latest episode of Off the Fence, brought to you in association with BoyleSports. This is your weekly go-to digital jump show. We ram it full with all the information you need for the jump season. We look back, we look ahead, and I get to do it all in the company of Barry Geraghty and Tony Keenan, week in, week out, from now until the spring festivals and beyond as well. And don't forget to hit subscribe on our YouTube channel to not miss a single episode of the show. That way you'll be notified and then you can keep up to date with all the jumping action. And as I said, week in, week out with Tony Keenan. How are you, Tony?
I'm good. We'll do well to ram it full this week with not very much to report on. Cork, the only show in town, but the racing there wasn't too bad. It did well to get it on.
They did indeed, as you say, pretty much the only show in town, but we've still got plenty to discuss, haven't we? Just the news and views around the racing world as well. Barry, how are you coping over there in the frost?
Yeah, good. Not too bad. Well wrapped up, Vanessa. So lots of frost, but didn't get a chance to build any snowmen. No snow to build snowmen, so we'll have to wait for another go.
You're doing better than my log delivery man who's had a shocker out there at the moment. But anyway, we'll move on from that. Let's start with the What Happened Where section, and as Tony has touched upon there, the only show in town at the weekend anyway of any real significance was Cork, and we got to see Energumene in the Hilly Way chase. Barry, he went off at 9-1 on, I think it was, in the end, and went out there and it was a bit like a schooling session for him, left the rest for dead, jumped really well, and you couldn't help but be impressed with the performance. But did we learn anything new, I guess is the question?
Yeah, no, it was a good performance and it's what you would have hoped for. Couple of little things. He did have a look at the gate, a little bit idle in front. He missed the first on the back, he missed the second last. But looking at the gate like that and missing the first on the back, he just wasn't as aggressive as he was maybe in Ascot. Where in Ascot he ran with his tail on fire. He was really on edge, really keen with Paul Town and really switched on. Received more relaxed, and for the same reason he put down at the first fence down the back, but jumped really well after that and put in a short one at the second last. So he's not just running as aggressively, which I think should help him in the finish, whereas he didn't get home maybe amazingly well in Ascot. I think he might get home better this year on the back of that. Just a bit of age, a little bit more relaxed. So I thought it was a good performance, and that's a positive for me anyway.
Okay, as things stand right now here today, him or Edwardstone for the champion chase? If you could ride one, Barry?
I'd stick with the current champion, I would. And Edwardstone's a very good horse. Really impressed him in Tingle Creek, but he still just has to make that step to beat an Energumene horse at that standard.
And just a quick word for Paul Townend, because when he's riding a horse that short in a race like that, he's really on hiding to nothing in terms of you just want a safe round from him. But there's no better man for the job at the moment than Paul Townend when it comes to those sort of horses.
You know, Paul's a brilliant rider, but he mentioned it on his interview when he pulled up on RTE, the national channel here, just how they're the hardest rides, often the hardest rides those, because you're galloping down the fence, you're meeting them on long strides and you're going, oh, I don't really need to go for a long one, but you have to just roll with it. And then he sticks in a short one and you roll to the next one, you're going to do a go again, or what do I do? So you can leave yourself second guessing a bit, because as you say, you're on a hiding to nothing. The potential is all for something wrong to happen or something negative. So it can be a little bit of a test for a rider, but Paul was very good on Energumene, and he is very good as well.
Should point out that one of BoyleSports' boosted prices this week for you guys is Energumene in the champion chase, boosted to 11-10 with BoyleSports for the champion chase in March. If you so wish, want to take that price, that is a boosted price for you. We've got a few others coming your way, and they also include Blood Destiny, who's been boosted to 22-1 for the Triumph Hurdle after his performance at the weekend for Team Mullins. Barry, the Triumph Hurdle division, as is always the case, yet to really sort of take any proper shape. But this horse still looks a work in progress, I think it's fair to say.
Oh, I liked him a lot now. He'd be on my short list. I loved everything about him. Yeah, down the back straight, he showed a lot of scope. He was jumping big. He's a real natural jumper. It comes really easy to him. But yet in the home straight, when he got a bit quicker and Paul was pressing him a little bit, he was real quick and slick and neat. So no, I thought he was very good, and pulled away from the last, which in Cork, it's such a flat track, it can be hard to get away from horses. But you saw Irish Point at the previous meeting, he pulled away from his field, and he went on. He was second in the Royal Bonded Fairyhouse. So I thought it was a really good performance. He's a horse I'd like. Paul obviously said afterwards as well, and we saw him on the Irish channel RTE, how he'd be close to the top is how he described him. So no, I'd say he's a smart one.
Oh, okay. You were more impressed than I was. Anyway, that's good to know. Tony, there was a couple of decent novice hurdle performances from the Henry de Bromhead stable. Two to talk about. The first of which over the shorter trip. We'll start with Arctic Bresil, who won, is also another one to be boosted by BoyleSports in the anti-post markets for Cheltenham, boosted out to 18-1 for the Ballymore. Not entirely sure what his ideal trip is at this stage, but like I say, the first of two for Henry. And were you impressed with this horse's performance?
I was impressed with aspects of it. I was a bit annoyed with myself. I finished up back in Mercury in this, and I think it was the second on Genuine Horse in 2 races. I backed the back Gordon Elliott's horse in the first that ran out. I was given out last week about backing horses with physical problems. I get annoyed with that, but I get doubly annoyed with backing horses with temperament that I should have spotted, because that's usually one of my main ways into races, trying to find an angle with a horse with a bit of temperament. So I got very annoyed at myself because I was a bit questioning of Elliott's in the first. On Mercury, I'd kind of forgiven his run in Limerick a bit. I thought it was the ground that was causing his head carriage there a little bit, but he might have a little kink in him too. So that might weaken the Arctic Bresil form, but Arctic Bresil himself was impressive. Could do a little bit of work with his jumping. Looked to have plenty of speed to me, and I'd say they'll stick to 2 miles for the moment. The one that I was really impressed with was the winner of this 3 mile Grade 2 novice hurdle, Hiddenvalley Lake. I think he deserves plenty of credit. His time now was excellent. If you're just comparing times from against the 2 mile races with the same part of the track that they covered, he was far and away the fastest hurdle winner on the day. And also I'd commend them in that race, give them a little bit of extra credit, because they come off the rail quite a bit. The ground had gotten quite chopped up. He was also the least exposed horse in the race to me. I know he's coming from a point background, but a lot of those in the race, the Dial horse and Cool Survivor, had plenty of runs and bumpers. Also, let's be clear about it, plenty of runs and bumpers. He was just coming off the single run in the maiden hurdle in Naas. He briefly looked for a moment at the top of the straight that he was going to take a bit of stoking up, but he came back in the bridle very smoothly and just absolutely cleared away from him in the last couple of forums. So I was really impressed with him. The only thing is, like, we're back in the same spot as we mentioned before. Like, he's now 8-1 for an Albert Bartlett. Like, that price wouldn't interest me at all. I'd rather try and find an 8-1 that was running at Clonmel last week. It seems very short for this early stage. One horse though I would give a little bit of credit to was the rag of the field, or one of the rags of the field, John Halley's horse, Senecia. He was coming off a little break. He'd fallen quite early in a run in Listowel prior to that. I thought the jockey left the others, the main market horses, get away from him on the run from 4 out to 3 out. And his horse actually finished off really well. I think he actually might have been second best in the day. I think there's a half decent novice hurdle, maybe a good novice handicap hurdle to be won with him. He's another that has very little race, and he only won his maiden hurdle in the summertime. And I'd say also a bit of nice ground might suit him. Ground was on the slow side yesterday. I think time form were giving it a soft. I think back with good in the description, he'd be one to be keeping on side, especially smaller yard. He probably won't be that noticed in the market. Oh, and also just on Henry de Bromhead does seem to have a solid team now of novice hurdlers this year. I felt his novice hurdle team last year was a weak one. He struggled to win the maiden hurdles, I think, during the winter. Willie Mullins, Gordon Elliott kind of dominating that. But this season they do seem to have bought a number of expensive point-to-pointers. Those two there are more to come, reading the stable tours and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see will he be able to, get it up from the grassroots, because Honeysuckle and Anna Plutarch have both shown his 2 top horses who've been the flag bearers have shown chinks in their armour, I think, on the first 2 starts this year.
Yeah, I think that is fair to say, and it is interesting that sort of different angle they look to have been taking at the Bromhead yard. There's some pretty expensive price tag standing in their stables at the moment, and those 2 that we've just spoken about there are a couple of them. Barry, just before we move away from this topic, actually, it's worth mentioning Henry de Bromhead's comments in the interview. I think it was after Hiddenvalley Lake actually had won. He did a good interview with Gary O'Brien, covered a couple of topics, both of Honeysuckle and a Plutarch in there, and some interesting takeaways. I guess the biggest one and the most sort of newsworthy one in regards to Honeysuckle, and the I was going to say the dreaded idea of her running in the mare's hurdle, but it sounds as though that is genuinely going to become an option for Honeysuckle. And I'm just going to put it out there. It seems a real shame that we're even talking about her for a mare's hurdle. I wish it wasn't there, so it wasn't an option for her. But it now looks like a likely one, does it, off the back of that interview?
Well, he's definitely put it up as an option, and I'd say every chance she might go there by the way he was talking. And the interesting thing for me then was he was happy with her run in the Hatton's Grace, which I was too. I thought she ran a good race. Maybe she was vulnerable on soft ground to two horses who'd love those conditions. So he felt she ran to her level. And for me, she's still the best. She's obviously a dual champion hurdle winner, but she's the best Irish contender at the minute for the champion hurdle. So I don't know why you'd be considering the mare's race. She's won it in the past, but she's won 2 champion hurdles. If you go back for the mare's race again, it would be disappointing. And I'm saying that obviously as a Constitution Hill fan, you'd love to see it made it as easy as possible for him. But no, I'd be disappointed if she ends up going that route. If she goes and wins the Dublin Racing Festival, you'd love to think that they'll go the champion hurdle route.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. I think the line where he said, you know, my job as a trainer is to find the race that she can win. Well, like if that is his line of thinking, then I just feel like they are going to run her in the mare's hurdle. But anyway, like you say, fingers crossed.
There's probably a conditions race at Fairyhouse and Easter. Either you could be an option if you wanted to try and win races. But no, I'd be disappointed if she goes there. As regards that Plutard, interestingly, he mentioned how he had a very high blood level, very high blood count, which suggested an allergic reaction. He had his blood taken before he left for Haydock and had his blood taken on return. So somewhere in the middle, he developed this allergic reaction. So that might explain his disappointment at Haydock.
Tony, let's talk about the mares. Mares going chasing. We saw a decent mares chase at Cork. The grade, was it grade 2? Yeah, it was grade 2, wasn't it? Imperious beating Dino Blue in the finish and is now currently cut to 6-1 with BoyleSports for the mares chase at the festival. Dino Blue 14-1 for the mares chase with BoyleSports. And you were pleased with this result. I thought, as last season you were such a fan of Dino Blue, I thought that you'd be a Dino Blue backer here, but you're not.
No, I was on Impervious here. Dino Blue was a little bit disappointing in the spring. I'd say our preparation for Cheltenham wasn't ideal, going straight to it without a second run. But I was actually surprised how the two mares jumped here. It was a reverse of their initial chase experience. To me, I was actually disappointed with how Impervious jumped. I thought she was much better at Wexford, whereas Dino Blue had really sharpened up from her initial spin over the course of distance. I thought she was excellent in front. She jumped like a real raw 2-miler. I definitely wouldn't be viewing her as a mare's chase horse at Cheltenham. She's too fast. I'd be keeping her to the minimum trip. But Impervious, despite probably, it wasn't that she jumped badly, it just wasn't slick as opposed to the favourite. But Impervious just outstayed her. Her stamina just kicked in after 2 out, finished off really well. It was an impressive performance. I think she's going to be better as she goes up and trip. That looks highly likely to me. Some of better visual performance, I think, over novice hurdles where in the 2.5 mile race. It was quite impressive at Listowel winning one of those. I think she was getting away with 2 miles just about. Her next start now will be a little bit of a dilemma. Colin Murphy I think she was entered until the 5 days in the Drinmore. I think they went here. It was an easier race and still a very valuable race, a grade 2. She has that entry at Christmas time in the race on St Stephen's Day, which looks at the moment it could really cut up. Willie Mullins has a number of entries, a number of high profile horses. Appreciate it. Fabiolo, so Gerhard, Dicer Dane, I'd say it's unlikely that any of those would run. I don't think he'd be rushing any of them to that race when they haven't had an initial start of offences. So that option is there, but it wouldn't really be Colin Murphy's style, I think, to back her up quite quickly. Like, you're talking about, 15 days? I think that would be a little bit tight. So that could be quite a weak race, I think, for Field or something else, Trinity Gordon Elliott.
Okay, I mean, I'd be rooting for her come March time because hopefully Brian Hayes will keep the ride and it'd be Brian's still looking for his first Cheltenham Festival winner, isn't he? I think he's had a Cheltenham winner now, but not a festival winner. So I'd love that to be his first festival winner. So I'll keep her on side as a sentimental nod there, Tony. I know you don't like that though, so I don't know why I said that to you really. You're probably rolling your eyes over there. I can't see your reaction, but you probably are. Barry, let's move on to Gaelic Warrior. Just a quick mention for him. Obviously disappointed so many people at the festival last year, just not being the touch everyone thought he was going to be. But he's come back this season and he's opened his account in pretty impressive form at Tramore, although I'm not quite sure how literal you can take, what was it, an 86 length victory in a hurdle race like that. I'm not sure it's a literal form line, is it?
Well, the second horse, Little Flower, who made the run in early and paid the price for trying to go the gallop with Gaelic Warrior. He had been third to Deeply Superficial in a maiden in Galway before that, only beaten 8 lengths. So the form of that horse would be okay, and he tired. The third horse probably isn't an awful lot, but the second horse is entitled to tire back to him. But that aside, Gaelic Warrior has run last year in the Fred Winter. He's a big raw horse who can only improve massively from last season as a 4-year-old to this season. So I'd see him as being a horse who's going to take a big jump forward from what he was capable of last year to this year. The only slight concern as regards Cheltenham is he has a tendency to jump right, but maybe they can iron that out. But I think he's a horse with a lot of potential, just because, a bit like Mighty Potter, the level of improvement from him being such a big horse, physical improvement between last season and this season, there's a massive chance for a big jump forward.
Okay, another positive nod from Barry for a hurdler then. Gaelic Warrior is now 9-1 for the Ballymore with BoyleSports. Boys, just before we wrap up the What Happened Where section, what were your performances of the week? I will go to Barry first. Performance of the week, please. Not a huge amount to pick from, really.
Not a lot to pick from, but an Energumene. I'd just love to see him and just that little bit more relaxed. So that was a great performance.
What about you, Tony? What was your performance of the week?
I'm going to go with Hiddenvalley Lake again. Just one little asterisk I would put over his form is these Cork races, these staying novice hurdles at Cork. I do feel sometimes they go an awful dawdle in those races, and the only really race in the turn in. And there's a race, this race here, and they've also got, I think, a listed novice hurdle in a previous meeting in November. They've a record of not throwing up very many good horses. I went back through these back to 2010. I think start of the decade there were some good horses, Black Hercules, Martello Tower, Road to Riches, but I do think on Sunday this was a little bit of an exception because they did seem to go a half decent gallop. So I'll put him as my performance of the week, just with that little concern about Cork form and those 3 mile races and how they work out.
Okay, little asterisk there. Right, don't forget the price boost that were on offer from BoyleSports then. They're for Energumene, Arctic Bresil and Blood Destiny, Champion Chase, Ballymore and Triumph accordingly. All details hopefully on your screen right now. So please do avail of said generosity from BoyleSports. And we can move on now to speak to Leon Blanche from BoyleSports. You've heard what our boys had to say about the weekend's action, but now let's hear from Leon and their views at BoyleSports.
The Hillyway Chase down in Cork, well, we just got to see how good Energumene still is. He was 11-10 to win his Champion Chase crown that he was victorious at Cheltenham in 2022. He's now into a 6-5 on clear favourite. And the nearest challenger in the book is Edwardstone, who was mightily impressive, winning the Tingle Creek at Sandown. But Energumene, he's such a powerful, powerful animal. We all remember that fantastic duel he had with Shishkin at Ascot. It certainly didn't do Energumene any problems. We all know Shishkin has had plenty of problems since beating Energumene at Ascot in that Clarence House chase. But Energumene 6-5 on for the Champion Chase. Blood Destiny was a very impressive winner for WP Mullins. Into a 14-1 chance now to win the Triumph Hurdle. Of course, Willie has got the favourite in that particular contest, Lossie Mouth, who was so impressive when she was victorious on her Irish debut at Fairyhouse. Willie's got a strong hand in the Triumph Hurdle. And another horse you should certainly put into your notebook was Arctic Bresil for Henry de Bromhead's team. Good winner at Cork, probably going to line up in the Supreme Novices Hurdle.
Right, Right, on with the show we go. Thank you very much to Leon, as always. Now we are back with our offence section. We don't always take offence to something each week, so we only put this section in when something has really rattled our cage. And this week we've got a good few things to talk about. The first of which, Tony, I'm coming to you for. Ronan McNally. All things Ronan McNally. Obviously, it came out that the IHRB are charging him with, I think it's 11 different rule breaches, and he's going to appeal, we should say that now, and there's still a lot more detail to come out, and the hearing date, etc, etc. But of the 11 rule breaches, I mean, they're all pretty serious, some more serious than others. You may deem it that way. But this has caught your attention this week, Tony. So take it away, please. All things Ronan McNally.
Quite mixed feelings on this whole case, which might be a little bit of a surprise. But look, the IHRB, the term they're using, they've proven a few things against Ronan McNally. He's failed to school his horses properly. He's failed to report some issues post-race. That's a low-grade thing now, in fairness. Horses not run to their merits. Horses ran in the manner of the usual phrasing, prejudicial to the integrity, proper conduct and good reputation of horse racing. There's the interaction with Kieran Fancies about passing inside information. There's concealed ownership stuff with the Dunyard and that. Look, if corruption is on a scale of black and white, this is very much at the black end. Unless this appeal is successful, he's looking at a long ban here, and I think he can have a few qualms about that part of it. And I suppose it's disappointing for him on a personal level with what he's trying to do, get his son going, a riding career. It's not going to help. But I was much interested in other stuff to do with the case here. Like the IHRB, like they really have gone all out with this at their end. Like looking at the list of the witnesses and people that had speaking, the 10 of them, and they had Louis Weston presenting it. Like that is the big guns that they're bringing in there. And he had a weird tweet after it, saying about how it was his pleasure to act for the IHRB in this complicated case of securing favourable handicap marks and battlement fees. And so I thought that was a little bit unnecessary now, considering there's an appeal pending. And look, you have your own thoughts on that. Like Ronan McNally seemed to have quite a junior person representing him. Again, I'm no law expert, but his side seemed only to be a junior counsel since 2019, much more inexperienced. Like he was at a distinct firepower disadvantage there, looking at the sort of the sides as they were assembled. Another thought after it was like just how difficult it is to prosecute these cases around sort of betting integrity and things like that. And reading through the IHRB's media release, like a lot of the betting evidence hasn't really emerged, and you'd be hoping that when they do come through with the sentencing that there will be a bit more on that. Like they had a person from Paddy Power Betfair as a witness there or given evidence, but like perhaps there was visible stuff there on the exchange. But like this stuff can get very, very difficult. You come back into the Charles Bourne's Viking Horde case where the IHRB could only pursue the betting aspect so far because, and again I'm just quoting from the IHRB here, someone associated was based in a distant part of the world and was said to be associated with match fixing and associated betting in connection with other sports. Like this stuff can get really sophisticated. They're using kind of versions of the exchange out in Asia and things like that. So a bit more information on that would be kind of very interesting to find out when the further stuff does come out. And also, like I think it's not an unreasonable point of view to think that Ronan McNally may not have been pursued with the same vigour if he was more of an insider from a kind of a racing heartland with a bit of a pedigree. Like again, I've mentioned this before, like, he is an outsider. He's from a border region. His address is part of it, and I wouldn't blame him for feeling a bit persecuted for all that the details do paint him in a fairly bad light. And look, as numerous people have mentioned, like the IHRB, like they've not shown a willingness to go after others who might be more traditional, might be more high profile. Like perhaps the floodgates are going to open after this, but I doubt it, shall we say. One other, I thought, quite interesting aspect out of it though was how they were applying rules to do with rides and inquiring with what jockeys were doing and things like that. There were a number of rides that were inquired into, you know, after the fact that the stewards hadn't really looked at on the day. but that they kind of examined some betting patterns and then kind of brought this up at the kind of inquiry. I thought that was really interesting, and I really hope they're going to kind of continue with that. I think that would be a very positive move, because I think sometimes putting when you have cases like this, or maybe raids that people feel are a little bit suspect and so on, putting maybe the 2 raids where maybe the horse didn't seem to be particularly fancied against the raid the next day when maybe there was a few quid for it, can be quite instructive, and I hope they're going to kind of continue with that. Look, I came across something on Twitter there over the weekend. I think it was post this or just before. He's a fella called Paul Fitzgerald, very interesting guy on Twitter, does a lot around kind of data and racing and modelling and this type of stuff. But I just love the way he put this kind of terminology about integrity and corruption in the sport. He was talking about UK and Ireland. He posed this question: how corrupt do you think the sport is? And it went on a grade scale from 1 to 4. So at the top level, it was endemically corrupt. Number 2, it was acceptable grey areas. Number 3, it was mostly straight, and number 4 was what? Corruption. Now, just in terms of that, how did that cook out in the end? Endemically corrupt come in at 27%, acceptable grey areas was 56%, mostly straight was 15%, and what corruption was 2%. Now, this case would suggest it was number 1, that's endemically corrupt. Personally, I don't really agree. I think it's number 2. At least that's kind of where I'm at the moment. But that has changed over the last few years. I would have been number 3. They are kind of just mostly straight for a long time. I've changed in that recently, just watching racing and seeing things like that. I still think there's enough in the sport, as a sort of I'm following the sport like 20 years at this stage. There's enough in the form book that it still makes sense to me. There's enough good stuff in the sport that rebalances the bad with the good to keep my interest. But look, when you're trying to sell it to someone who's coming in with their betting pound or betting euro for the first time, trying to attract them in the sport, there's so many other sports out there that don't have this corruption element. Look, all sports have some element of corruption. All life has some element of corruption. But of course, yeah. in light of this, you'd definitely be seeing some of more than others.
Yeah, there's some very interesting takeaways, very interesting points there, and this is a story that has still got plenty to unravel from it, so we will no doubt be talking about it again in the new year when more details come out. So yeah, stay tuned for more Ronan McNally. Barry, another thing that sort of hit the headlines a little bit this week is the whip again, but this time the jockeys here in the UK have sort of come out now and had something to say about the new whip rules that are going to be brought into place in the new year in February time, just before Cheltenham. And they're not happy. And it's not so much about the counting and the number of strikes, but the uproar seems to be more with the way in which they're being asked to use the whip, how they're being asked to use the whip. Can you just expand on that, please, for us?
Yeah, so the lads were all happy with the idea of the change in the whip rules, but then there's a bedding in period for a month or so where they're going to have fake inquiries into, you know, what you would have got if you were operating under the new rules. And there were obviously days have been handed out like hotcakes. Adam Wedge recently would have been given 12 days for what looked a very innocent ride, and Adam missing a whip jockey. So through this, the lads are feeling a little bit aggrieved by it, and there's lots of reasons why. So here is the stick you would use, which is a padded stick, which is limited as regards the amount of harm it can do. But when you're using the stick in that position, you will strike towards the horse's hind quarters. But when you're in this position, which they want, the backhand position, it can fall short on the horse's ribs, which can cause a suspension. But add that into then riding a finish. So you have your whip again up in this position, the old position, and you want to change your hands, change your whip hand. It's literally just that. So it's a straightforward movement. But when you have the whip in this position, which they want, and you're riding and you're using it, you have to catch the reins, pull it through, and then use it. So if you're trying to correct a horse who's after ducking left or right, it's going to take that extra second or so to change your whip hand, where it would be instant in the old style. So for me, that was the first thing that hit me. But when the lads are being subjected to the rule changes and the fines and bans that are there, it seems like it's going to be too much. So I'm not sure how it's going to play out, but there's a serious can of worms in this one.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, we sort of the backhand forehand position thing has been discussed plenty, but I've not heard many people discuss the changing of the whip hand and how much trickier it can be. Yeah, I can see why the jockeys aren't very happy, but I wouldn't be surprised if I don't know if the BHA are going to take backward steps, but they're obviously going to have to look at it, because if the people who are actually having to use the whip aren't happy with the situation, then there's a problem, isn't there? But anyway, let's move on because time is running out. We just need to do a bit of a look ahead to the coming weekend's action, but it is very tricky given that frost and snow, specifically here in the UK, is causing havoc with jump race meetings, as you would expect, up and down the country. But what we do hope will happen on Friday and Saturday is the Howden Christmas Ascot meeting for 2 days there, including Long Walk Hurdle on Saturday, the big showpiece there, live on Sky Sports Racing, of course. And if the Howden Long Walk Hurdle happens, then we're going to see a rematch, Barry, between Champ, Paisley Park, Goshen in there. Thought Queen's Brook was a very interesting runner. Champ is currently the 13-8 favourite for that rematch with Paisley Park. But yeah, Queen's Brook at 12. So did that catch your eye at all, or have I got a bit mad there?
Yeah, definitely an interesting entry, but she would have to step up a good bit on what she's done today. I'd imagine she'd love the trip as well, but you only have 7 runners or 7 entered, so it's each way options mightn't just be amazing. As regards Champ and Paisley Park, brilliant race in Newbury, rematch again. But if you look into Champ's form, it's been the first day. He's been at his best for the last 2 seasons. He has struggled to back up that form. Where on the other hand, Paisley Park generally improves for his first run. I would imagine they had him a good bit fitter for Newbury than they would have had him for previous first runs. But there's a chance for more improvement in Paisley Park, and I just fear for Champ on his second run, just judging him on his previous 2 seasons. So maybe Paisley Park could be the one to side with if we get racing.
Okay, Paisley Park potentially. Tony, the other, just focusing in on the Ireland action sort of relatively briefly, but obviously the John Durkin's going to be rescheduled to a week today, so Monday the 19th, and Galloping Deschamps, we're still waiting to see him make his seasonal reappearance. And then, I mean, all this weather now is going to cause havoc on Mullins' Christmas plans, isn't it? Because it's all getting a little bit too close for comfort, really, in terms of the fixtures.
Yeah, that was my thought on it. Look, I think the frost is here till Friday. Might be getting some rain on Saturday and Sunday, but you know, it's going to be tight. I think Willie Mullins at this stage, not saying he's going to sacrifice Christmas, but he doesn't seem to have the horses just prepped for these Grade 1 novice chases, at least. Like a lot of the entries that he has just haven't had a run yet. Like the 2 mile race at Leopardstown on St Stephen's Day, he might have Kilcrut for the race down in Limerick. The 3 mile race on the 29th again, as the Ion Maximus could possibly go for that. He remains a maiden still. But I don't think Willie Mullins is going to be getting too caught up with this. Look, the frost is just going to come at an inopportune time for him. I think he might just take his beating on this a bit. Gordon Elliott seems to have got loads of his horses out and plenty of runs in, a run and a win into them, the likes of Field Door and Jerry Colomb and Minella Crooner and so on. But again, the point just about the Christmas racing versus the racing later on, Christmas actually has some of the lower value races. Like even if you take the kind of Gold Cup equivalent race, the Savills chase, the Leopardstown version, was worth 103,000 to the winner last year. The Irish Gold Cup at the Dublin Racing Festival worth 140,000. Cheltenham Gold Cup's worth 315 sterling to the winner, and the Punchestown Gold Cup 162k to the winner. So you know, I don't think it's just interesting that maybe prize money values don't play an awful lot of impact in it, but I think there is a strong reason there why Willie Mullins just backload his campaigning of horses towards kind of Cheltenham into Punchestown. As to the John Dorkin itself, like 7 I think were left in that. The only one that came out, I think, if the initial entries was conflated, he'd be an obvious one that would go for the 3 mile, the Savage Chase on the 28th. Possibly maybe 1 or 2 of the others might switch. I think Statler might be possible. They might hold him off for the 3 mile race. But I think they'd be keen to start Galloping Deschamps out at 2.5 miles rather than giving him a run over 3 where the rivals are fit. I was thinking back, the last, I suppose, equivalent horse that would have had a reputation like this going out for this type of campaign was York Hill, and he was never the same after his novice season, but starting him off in the what is now the Savage Chase didn't work out, and that was kind of the end of him. So I think they might be keen to stick to the shorter trip at least first time up.
Okay, we will wait and see, and fingers crossed the weather relents a little bit and we get the racing on this weekend. That would be absolutely ideal. Before we wrap up, please viewers, do check out the BoyleSports offers on the screen right now. They are not to be missed, so do avail of them. Our sponsors have been very generous with their offers, so take a look at them, head over to their website and avail of them. Right, that about concludes the show. Thank you, as always, to Barry and Tony for their contributions this week. Do not forget to hit subscribe on our YouTube channel, because that way you won't miss a single episode of Off the Fence. It's very important that you press the subscribe button below, please. And do stay tuned for us next Tuesday, because it'll be a bumper episode of Off the Fence, because not only will we hopefully be looking back at some good racing action, weather permitting, but we'll also be looking ahead to all the Christmas racing on both sides of the Irish Sea. So it'll be a bumper episode coming your way next Tuesday. But in the meantime, thank you very much for watching. That was Off the Fence.